Good evening, and welcome to this edition of Labor Vision. This evening's show is part of our Legislative Issues series hosted by Jim Parisi. I'm Bob Delaney, Executive Director of the Institute for Labor Studies and Research. Labor Vision, a production of the Institute, focuses on topics of importance to working Rhode Islanders. We hope you enjoy this evening's edition.
Thank you for joining us for this segment of Labor Vision, where we bring the General Assembly into your living room. My name is James Parisi. I'm a field representative with the Rhode Island Federation of Teachers and Health Professionals, and I'm your host this evening. Today we're going to be talking about teacher evaluation and specifically some legislation surrounding teacher evaluation. We're pleased to have two guests with us. Representative Bill O'Brien was just elected this past fall. He represents the 54th District of North Providence, and he is a math teacher at Hope High School, and he is a proud member of the Providence Teachers Union. Bill serves on the HEW committee as well as the Committee for Environment and Natural Resources. Bill, thank you for joining us today.
Glad to be here.
Great. Also joining us is Frank Flynn. Frank is president of the Rhode Island Federation of Teachers and Health Professionals. He had about 35 years of teaching experience in the city of Cranston, where he was president of the Cranston Teacher Alliance. And Frank has been president of the State Federation of the AFT here in Rhode Island since 2010. Frank, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Bill, let's start with how you got involved in politics. What motivated you to run for General Assembly?
Actually, the economy was awful in North Providence. Foreclosures, we had over 166 foreclosures that year in my town, and I said, I'm going to run. And I just started walking, and I kept walking, and I kept walking, and I just happened to win. So that's the main thing. It's all about the people of North Providence for me, and I want to make their lives a little bit better. And that's what I try and do every day.
So this was your first run at office, correct?
The second run. I lost to Greg the first time by
Greg Shadone.
Mm-hmm. And then I won this election.
Mm-hmm. But you had never held any other office or run for anything else?
Nope, I was just town committee.
Okay.
Democratic town committee.
Yeah. And talk about your teaching for a moment. What got you involved in public school teaching?
Well, I always wanted to be in the Peace Corps. So when after I was working for Benny's for a couple of years, I said, I want to teach. I decided to teach because I want to help children. And I decided to go in the Peace Corps for 2 years to get the experience I needed. And they put me in South Africa, and I fell in love with it. I fell in love with every aspect of teaching, how you shape the young minds and you make them better people. And when I came back, I went to grad school in Miami. I got my enough credits to get my teaching certificate in Rhode Island, and I came back and I applied at Hope High School, which is where I am now, and I was hired like 2 days after I came back in Rhode Island because I had a math degree.
And you've stayed close to home. You're a graduate of North Providence High and Rhode Island College, aren't you?
Yes, I am. I was also captain of the football team at North Providence, and I've lived in North Providence basically all my life except for Peace Corps and grad school.
Okay. And other than this issue of teacher evaluation, what other legislative issues are you working on this session?
Well, the governor has a couple of cuts in nursing homes, so my top priority right now is to restore that $12 million cut. And I've been working with the governor's office to try and get that put back in.
Okay, that's a terrific project, and,
yes, it is.
And our SEIU members certainly appreciate your advocacy on that issue. Frank, who does the AFT represent in Rhode Island?
We have approximately 9,000 members. Most of our locals are K-12. We have about 6,000 K-12 teachers. We represent the college professors at both Bryant College and Rhode Island College. We represent the professional staff at Rhode Island College as well as the adjunct professors. We represent the court reporters. We have a local at the Rhode Island Department of Ed. We represent two locals of visiting nurses. We represent the Rhode Island Substance Abuse Counselors. And I hope I'm not forgetting anyone, but we have a very vibrant retiree local chapter as well.
Sure. And other than this issue of teacher evaluation, what are the legislative priorities of the Rhode Island Federation of Teachers this session?
Our priorities this year, one is responsible contract resolution, which we've been working on for several years. We're also very interested in accelerating the funding formula for schools, making sure that it's funded and accelerating it if possible. And also something that's also very important to us would be the restoration of some of the funds that were cut to the developmentally disabled community 2 years ago. They began restoring them last year with an additional $9 million, a little over $9 million, and of the 24 that had originally been cut, and we'd like to see them move further along in that process, particularly to make sure that the money gets down to the providers.
Terrific. So this is the first year that we've seen legislation directed specifically at teacher evaluation. Representative, you put in a bill that would say that student achievement shall count for no more than 1/3 of a teacher's overall rating. So tell us about the bill and tell us why you put it in.
Well, the teacher evaluation bill, that's evaluation has come out from RIDE, has is really putting inner city teachers at a disadvantage. And some principals are counted almost 70%. And if you have test scores like we have in Hope High School, for example, we have excellent teachers, but we're losing them because they don't want their job to be in jeopardy. So they're leaving the city of Providence. Math teachers have moved, the young math teachers have moved out of our district because of that 70%. And we lost 2 at Hope High School this year. They both went to classical, where obviously the test scores are going to be more favorable to a teacher. And so this is an attempt to just bring it a little bit more in line and fair for all teachers in the state of Rhode Island.
Have you heard from a lot of your colleagues about the legislation and the issue of teacher evaluation?
Yes, I have. I mean, we have 2 teachers out on maternity leave right now. They don't know there's no regs from RIDE to deal with teachers who are on maternity leave. So what are they going to give them, a bad evaluation? I mean, this is the things, it's 4 years now we've been going through this, and we do not have regulations in place for every situation. We got teachers out on long-term disability. What's going to happen with them? There's no regs. The commissioner has not come up with any regs to deal with those 2 situations. And she's been in place for 4 years now.
I sense a certain frustration from you. You probably hear that same frustration from your coworkers, don't you?
Absolutely, absolutely. They're doing the best they can with the resources they have, and they get kicked in the teeth every single day.
Sure. Frank, before we talk about the legislation, could you describe to our viewers what involvement your union has had with the issue of teacher evaluation generally?
Sure. Ironically, when Hope High School was going through their reorganization under No Child Left Behind, which is over 4 years ago, and we had our previous commissioner, McWalters, was in place, we realized that a lot of the conditions of employment that were a result of the policies of No Child Left Behind were going to be based upon teacher evaluations, and we didn't have a standardized or even an efficient teacher evaluation in place in many schools or many school districts. So we knew that it was important for us to get involved in that early on. Since then, we've been involved, our organization, in a labor management consortium with 6 of our districts. and we've been working very closely with the superintendents and the administrations and the teachers' unions in those districts to make sure that we have a RIDE-approved model, which we did. We brought two federal grants, two grants in, an AFT innovation grant and an I3 grant from the U.S. Department of Ed to facilitate the implementation and the design and implementation of those grants. We've done a tremendous amount of work in developing them. We have one of two. The other is another AFT local, Coventry, that have RIDE-approved models other than the actual RIDE model. And that's on the professional practice piece of the evaluation.
Could you describe to our viewers what that is compared to, you know, the student achievement portion of teacher evaluations?
Sure. The professional practice piece would involve the actual classroom observations, a teacher's questioning skills, a teacher's knowledge of their curriculum, the teacher's involvement in the school, they're dealing with parents and their professional development responsibilities, all of those professional responsibilities that aren't measured by student achievement tests or student measures.
Did the AFT consortium with the superintendents get involved in the student achievement portion, the measuring student achievement portion of teacher evaluations?
No, whatever model that you have developed, us or the Coventry models, we only were involved in the professional practice. The entire student learning component was developed and mandated by the Rhode Island Department of Ed.
Representative, why should the General Assembly get involved in this issue of teacher evaluation?
Well, representatives should get involved because it's causing an absolute disaster in our inner cities. Look at the upheaval in Central Falls. Are you going to just shut down schools every single time? Hope High School is always going to be testing at the very bottom because of the situation they were put in. All our good students in the city of Providence go to classical. All the students that are left over get split up between all the other high schools. So when I have my freshmen in ninth grade algebra, when they sit before me in August, all of my kids, I know, without even looking at a transcript, they are 2 to 3 to 4 years behind in mathematics. And we are evaluating that. And at the end, even if I do a fantastic job, I get them 2 years improvement. They go from 6th grade to 8th grade. I'm still measured as I failed. That's not failing. That's doing your job. If you improve a kid 2 years in 1 year, then you did a great job, and you should be commended for that. With the evaluation system that's in place right now, you are checked off as a failing teacher, and that's wrong.
So your bill has two components. One caps the amount that student achievement could have, whether it's a standardized test or any other measure of student achievement. And then the other portion says that all of these student achievement issues won't be implemented by the Board of Ed until they're deemed valid and reliable.
Correct.
Do you think the current system is valid and reliable?
No, it's absolutely not valid. As I just explained to you, you can improve a kid 2-3 years in over the high school. Let's take the high school as a whole. We can improve it. We could get a child that's testing at 6th grade, testing at 5th grade math, 6th grade English. At the end of her 3 years, 2 years, freshman and sophomore year, she could be testing at 8th grade in both, which is an improvement 3 years in one and 2 years in another. And so she improved more than what she should have in 2 years, right? But the high school still gets a failing grade for that student. And that's not right. You have to test them when they come. If you want a valid system, you have to test them and find out where they are when they come into the school, and then you test them 2 years and see how much improvement they have made. Not just give a blanket test and say, oh, they're 2 years behind, so you fail. So if you get a kid, and we get kids that don't even know a word of English. In 2 years, they're tested on a 5th and 6th grade. How is that not improvement? They come to us, they don't know one word of English. In 2 years, they're tested at 6th grade. How is that not doing your job? How is that English teacher a failing English teacher? And that's what's wrong with this teacher evaluation system that they have in place today.
And your legislation would fix it by
Absolutely.
putting the brakes on it.
Yep.
Okay. Frank, you were at the House Labor Committee when this bill was first heard. What did you tell the members of that committee on why Representative O'Brien's bill should pass?
Well, first of all, I think we need to reiterate today, and as I did when I testified, that we're not opposed to a fair, valid, and reliable evaluation system for all teachers. And that evaluation system needs to provide input that's reliable and useful for those teachers to identify their strengths and weaknesses and to improve their teaching skills. That's important if we're going to make progress with students. Continue to make progress with students. And that's the first thing I testified against. The other thing we testified against is that this method, this system is unproven. And it's not, we don't believe it's valid or reliable. And until it is, then we need to put the brakes on and gather the data. We're not opposed to data gathering. It's important. We need to do that in order to prove its validity and reliability. But we're not doing that right now. The commissioner is actually gathering that data at the end of this school year, and it may be used to have consequences about employment decisions for teachers. And that's clearly wrong because this is an experiment. If this were a pharmaceutical company and they were developing a drug, they wouldn't be testing it and marketing it while they were still developing it. And so it's ridiculous that they're moving too fast. We need to do it right and not just do it quickly to be in compliance with the timelines of a federal grant. And that's what's driving this right now. And that's really unfortunate and it's wrong.
The federal grant being Race to the Top, which provided some money to develop this, but I don't think the intent of Race to the Top was to create bad systems that force people out of teaching, particularly in urban public school districts.
Right. And that's exactly what's happening. You see teachers, the young teachers, they come to Providence now for 3 years, and then they're finding up jobs elsewhere. We want to keep those teachers because they're good teachers. But hey, they say, hey, well, why am I going to put up with this? Every year, I'm being told that I'm a failing teacher. Everything coming from RIDE says I'm a failing teacher. You know, no one likes to be told that. We all like to be saying, hey, you're doing a pretty good job. I haven't heard I'm doing a pretty good job in a long time. I think I do a pretty good job. But you know what? I know I do. But I like to hear it every once in a while. And the improvements that we make in the kids' lives every single day has to count also. We're there, we're social workers, we're psychiatrists, and we're teachers. And those things have to be counted too. And what RIDE has done, it's like you're a robot. This is what you do. There's no measurement of how you deal with the kids, how you interact with the kids, how you help the kids every single day, teach just basic values, and which in the inner city, for the most part, they get it from teachers. It's unfortunate that that is the truth.
Frank, you were at the hearing. If you could take a minute or so and just characterize for our viewers what the opposition to this bill was.
The opposition obviously was from the Rhode Island Department of Ed because this is their plan. The other opposition was from the Rhode Island Shoreline Coalition, or whatever they're rebranding themselves as these days. And I'm not quite sure why, other than they're against anything that has to do with public employees having any rights at all for them. RIDES wants this to go forward again because they have this artificial timeline, and that's what, and they want to stick to it rather than getting it right. I think the most compelling part of the testimony, most of the testimony, came from the teachers that participated that day. We had a number of teachers from different communities, and they were outstanding in their testimony. And the committee asked some wonderful questions, and they gave them a lot of leeway. They were allowed to pour their hearts out about the impact that this is having on them and as professionals, and the problems and pitfalls that they see within this evaluation system and the way it's being implemented within their classrooms, and the factors that they don't believe are being factored in to their evaluation in the current system, the way it's designed.
Representative, we could probably spend a lot of time talking about kneecap tests as a graduation requirement, and maybe that we'll do another show on that. But is there any relationship with that issue of students not graduating because of passing a standardized test and this teacher evaluation legislation?
Of course, everything relates to the kneecaps. Because if your school is like Barrington High School, their commissioner of properties never even looked at any evaluations from Barrington High School. They don't care about it. She focuses on inner city schools, and she wants to dismantle them for whatever reason. I don't know why, but she is putting pressure on inner city schools to just dissolve and get rid of teachers. I don't understand her logic. And again, what her evaluation system is doing is all the young teachers, they have 2-3 years and they're getting out. And that's not what we want. That's not good for the city of Providence. It's not good for any inner city school system in this state. We are losing our best teachers because why am I going to do this? Why am I going to put up with this? Why am I going to be told that I'm a bad teacher every single day? Why do I have 50 people coming in and out, checking off? All right, you have you have the date on the board. Oh, you have the course standards there, and then they leave. Right? How is that evaluating a teacher? That's not evaluating a teacher. That's a checklist. And that's my opinion, and it's the opinion of a lot of our teachers. And if you look, what's happening is we're losing our best teachers. They're going, and we have like a revolving door of new teachers every single year. And that's not what we want. We want to keep these teachers here so they can do their job.
Okay. Well, I appreciate your passion on this issue, and I'm sure public school teachers around the state appreciate your leadership on this issue. Thank you both for your time today. I hope to maybe have another show a couple of months down the road where you can talk about how you got this bill passed through the Assembly this year.
I hope so.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for joining us for this edition of Labor Vision.
To thank the other speakers. That this is so inspiring, and it's just where we need to be, and we're on the road, and I'm so glad to hear Juan say that we are not afraid, we are coming out of the shadows, and we're with you. So I'm here to talk about a topic that hasn't always been easy for labor, and quite frankly still is not in many quarters: immigration reform. And you might wonder why now? Why is labor so focused on the issue of immigration reform right now? Especially at a time when we're spending so much time nationally and putting our energies into preserving Medicare and Medicaid and the Social Security system, and we're making sure that the rich pay their fair share of taxes. But right now, labor is working really hard at opening up our arms for all workers, despite where they were born, and despite what papers they may be carrying. And the reason is because we understand, as a previous speaker said, this is not one person's problem. This is not the 11 million people who are living in the shadows problem. This is everybody's problem. We are all in this together. Labor understands that immigration reform that ensures a path to citizenship for all workers and is family-based, family-focused, that brings families together rather than tearing them apart, is the key to maintaining the middle class in this country and is the only way the economy can grow for all Americans to enjoy. We understand that as long as millions upon millions of people are working in the shadows, in the underground economy, forced to work for meager wages, with no benefits, with no rights or protections, often in dangerous situations, the security of every American worker is at risk. So nationally, the AFL-CIO is working, with community and religious groups and immigration activists, and of all groups, the Chamber of Commerce, trying to craft an immigration policy that makes sense for all workers and their families. We are working to improve immigration laws so that the law protects all of us, not oppresses some of us. We understand we need to move forward to do the right thing. Fighting for comprehensive immigration reform is a must in this country if we are to remain the greatest nation in the world. And labor understands we cannot live in a world where there are two classes of workers, where one class can work hard and has a chance to get ahead, and the other class works in the shadows. And no matter how hard they work, they will be stuck in the cycle of poverty. Labor understands that we cannot have a country with two sets of rules for workers, where one group of workers can join a union, make decent wages, and has rights on the jobs, and the other group of workers stays in the shadows with no worker protection, no way to defend themselves against employers who take advantage of their status, no ability or very little ability to even complain if they are cheated out of their wages, as low as they may be. Labor understands that every worker needs to be treated with dignity. Every worker deserves to be able to get ahead. This cannot happen as long as we have millions upon millions of people living in the shadows. So we are working to craft a policy that will put immigrants on a clear and certain path to citizenship, not just temporary status. The roadmap should be certain, not contingent on ambiguous measures such as proof of regular employment that employers in the underground economy, by the way, will never produce for us, will never provide. We favor an expedited program to clear up the backlog of more than 4 million current green card holders. We will oppose any program which will perpetuate second-class status for more than 11 million immigrants residing in the U.S. by attempting to confer legalization without a clear roadmap to citizenship, as some have advocated. We believe that all workers, regardless of immigration status, are entitled to back pay, should not suffer discrimination, should have the right to join a union, and that there should be more protections for immigrant workers who expose violations of law so that they are not silenced by the fear of deportation. We believe that workers should have the ability to reunite with their families, not be separated from their families. So we have our work cut out for us, but I sit here before you today to say that without comprehensive, common sense immigration reform, our middle class will be further eroded. And every day, more and more Americans will get caught up in that cycle of poverty. And that is why now is the time for labor to be working on immigration reform. Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for this edition of Labor Vision. We appreciate your input and encourage your comments. Labor Vision can be seen 3 times each week, Tuesdays at 7 p.m., Thursdays at 8 p.m., and Saturdays at 5 p.m.
Today we're going to be talking about a really important, interesting, and high-profile issue of marriage equality. And we're pleased to have two guests with us today. Representative Art Handy represents the 18th District in Cranston. Art is a member of the House HEW Committee as well as chair of the Environment and Natural Resources Committee. Representative, thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me, Jim.
Okay. Also joining us is Jim Riley. Jim is the Secretary-Treasurer of the United Food and Commercial Workers, Local 328. He was elected into that position in 2002, the same year that Art Handy joined the General Assembly. Jim, thank you for joining us.
Happy to be here, Jim.
Representative, so what is marriage equality?
Well, you know, it's funny. I've been talking about this for a little while now. I know we were talking about how long I've been doing it. It's my 11th year doing it. But early on, kept on reminding people it's really about the paper side of marriage. It's about the civil side of marriage for same-gender couples, saying that essentially we just think they should be treated the same as my wife and I. You know, we got married in '97. And I don't see any reason why, and you know, why other folks shouldn't have access to the same thing if they're committed and they want to have those rights and responsibilities. That's really what it was about, and it's about that state side of the equation. But the evolution I've had, because I've seen many members have evolutions on it, but for me, it's sort of within that issue. I've seen a lot of it's from the relationships I've built with people that have come to advocate on this issue, and I've just realized how emotionally important this is for them, and how, you know, and so for me, that's what it's really also grown into, is that ability for people to make that kind of a commitment, that for them the only real, you know, relationship that they see in that role is marriage. And so that's what really, to me, it's about saying that people have equal access to that institution.
The number of legal protections are vast, but the bill's actually pretty simply worded. So could you tell our viewers what the bill really does?
Sure. It's really essentially two things. One, it essentially just says that two people of the same gender can get married. It still continues to make it clear there's certain folks we don't allow to get married under state law to avoid incest and other things like that. And then also it makes it clear, again, it's really just repeating what's in the Constitution in my mind, but it makes it clear a pastor, a priest, a minister, a rabbi, et cetera, is not required to marry anybody that doesn't meet his or her faith implications. The same thing would be true of a religious institution. It would not be required to perform that ceremony. Because again, I think those religious, there's still clear religious rights there. The Catholic Church doesn't want to do it. There's definitely other churches that don't want to do it. But then there's also some Jewish synagogues that want to. There's the Episcopal churches that want to. All we're saying is, you know, there's clarity that, you know, if you want to, you can. If you don't want to, you don't have to within those churches.
So the bill does include some religious protections then?
Yeah, a lot of it is, again, I believe that the Constitution already protected people in that, but yes, it states that there very clearly.
Okay. Jim, why is marriage equality important to the labor movement?
Because we see it not only as a human right and as well as a civil right, but we also see it as a worker's right. And I think if you look back, whenever in the history of the United States, whenever there was struggle against ignorance and discrimination, the labor movement has always been in the forefront.
I know a number of different unions are also involved in it. It's not just the AFL-CIO. Have you seen a lot of grassroots union support for this issue? Besides the United Food and Commercial Workers Union, we've gotten great support, Rhode Islanders for United for Marriage, from the NEA, the National Education Association, the American Federation of Teachers, the United Auto Workers, the Painters Union, Scott Duham especially has been terrific from day one, the Iron Workers Union, SEIU 1199, and all under the sort of umbrella of the great leadership that we have on a state level in the AFL-CIO with George Nee and Maureen Martin, and lots of other volunteers and folks that show up and help out. Jim, I know you've been involved in the organizations in support of this legislative issue, and I also know that you've testified on the bill personally in the past. So how do you see labor's role in shaping this political debate and moving this issue forward? Marriage confers automatic responsibilities and protections that are essential for sustaining families. And wages are not the only issue with us. There are other issues too, and marriages decisively affect the worker's ability to protect their family.
We know that. That's why I talked about it being a workers' issue. And I'll just give you an idea of whether federal or state level. There are over 1,400 rights and protections guaranteed under the law for people that are married. Civil marriage provides families with 1,400 rights. Access to workers' compensation, protections for the family of a worker on the job. Access to Social Security protection upon the death, disability, or retirement of a spouse. Access to Employee Retirement Income Security Act, to leave a pension to your spouse. Access to Family and Medical Leave Act protection to care for a new child or a sick or injured family member. Access to COBRA, so spouses don't immediately lose health care insurance once one is laid off. And access to hundreds of other critically important benefits and protections. For instance, under workman's compensation, a same-sex partner is not recognized as a worker's dependent for purposes of the workers' compensation system, which is intended to assist an employee and an employee's family if they were wholly or partially dependent on the employee at the time of the employee's job-related injury. Under Social Security law, if a covered worker is retired, disabled, or dies, his or her same-sex partner cannot claim benefits for the benefit of himself or herself and any children based on the worker's work credits. They go on and on and on.
And those are all programs that the labor movement fought long and hard for. And there was a segment of the population, both union members and non-members, who couldn't access it. So I know there's a real grassroots effort involved in supporting this issue that the labor movement's involved in. Jim, what have you seen and what activities are going on in terms of fundraising?
I credit Ray Sullivan and also Ocean State Action and JWJ and all of the many myriad of volunteers, both from labor organizations, non-labor organizations, just people from the community, working with Rhode Islanders for United for Marriage. And they've been having phone banks and walks and fundraisers and lots of different activities on a regular basis. And as far as labor is concerned, besides the fact that we help out in the phone banks and all that too, we had our fundraiser, our big labor fundraiser for marriage equality last week at the USCW Hall. And it was very, very well attended. It was catered by Senator Josh Miller's fabulous food service people from over at his 2 restaurants in the city. And he did a terrific job there too. And we raised $48,700 for the cause so we could keep up that activity. And we're proud of that night, and proud of what we have brought to the table, what we brought to the table that night, and what we'll continue to bring to the table until we have the party and celebrate, because we finally joined the rest of New England and brought marriage equality to Rhode Island.
What are the experiences that you've seen in your district about the negative, the folks who are really unhappy with this? Do you get a lot of that?
If somebody asks me about marriage equality or about gay marriage or where do I stand on it, probably 19 times out of 20, they're in favor of it. That's I'm getting the question when people want to make sure I'm for it, not the other way around. And I have not heard other people tell me that different. Again, there's some folks that claim that there's this big share of their district. I asked them if they door knocked. They did not. So I think that they think they know their district, but I challenge them to go out and actually talk to their constituents. I think they'll find something very different to be true.
Sure. Jim, same question for you. You know, within your organization, are you getting a lot of pushback from your members about your prominent role on this issue?
None. None from any of the members. Nothing from any of the staff, nothing from anything of the executive board. If anything, they're proud of the work that I'm doing, and they're proud that like I talked about other labor leaders, that not only are we involved in hours, wages, and working conditions for our employees, but we're also involved in lots of other ancillary activities that are good for the entire community.
And I think that you know, I mean, one of the things that I think that it makes me proud to sort of be a friend of labor in that sense, because I know that one of the things I work to do is try to pull people together, see the environmental movement be able to work with the labor movement, because I think there's a huge amount of overlap and opportunity there. Anti-poverty side of things, again, George Nee has always been there for things I've worked on anti-poverty issues and things like that. But I do know that there's this tremendous overlap. I mean, you know, there's a self-interest in that sense. But there's opportunity at the same time too to build those bridges that makes us stronger as a progressive, pro-people kind of movement.
Well, the labor movement has always been about more than just wages, hours, and working conditions, but sometimes even our own members don't know that history, and it's good for us to remind them, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Okay. Well, I thank you both very much for your time. This was a great discussion about a very important issue, and maybe we'll have you on again when the show is done and we can talk about results.
Let's get you the party first.
Yeah, get the party. We'll get the next show will be at the party or something.
Thank you much.
You're welcome.
Thanks very much.
Nice to see you.
And thank you for joining us for this segment of Labor Vision. Thank you.
While some of the most conservative congressmen in Washington are working to end Saturday delivery of the mail, letter carriers across the country and here at Garden City are calling attention to why six-day service is so important to our economy. Congressman, tell us why Saturday delivery is so important for Rhode Island.
Well, I'm here with all these great letter carriers to raise awareness about why it's important to preserve the Saturday delivery. Six-day delivery is what we've always known the Postal Service to stand for, and getting the mail delivered there in a timely manner, reliably. And to have Saturday delivery go away, I think would have unintended consequences that we can't anticipate fully right now. I think it would impact seniors, I think it would impact businesses, I think it would impact communities, and I don't want to see that happen. I think there are alternatives that we can look at before we even think about having to eliminate Saturday delivery. I think this is a action of last resort, eliminating Saturday delivery, but it seems to be that in some members of Congress think it's an option of first resort. It's the thing that we should look at first, and I disagree. I think that's a backwards approach.
About 200 members of the National Letter Carriers Association gave up a gorgeous Sunday afternoon today to educate Rhode Islanders about how crucial Saturday delivery is for the small businesses here in the Ocean State. It's also critical to the thousands of people that work for the post office here in Rhode Island. Do you know, Ingrid, how many people does the post office employ here in Rhode Island?
Letter carriers, they employ about 50,000.
50,000. Yeah. How many jobs do you think would be in jeopardy if we ended Saturday service?
Probably about a quarter of the workforce.
Okay,
so we're talking quite
more than 10,000 jobs.
We're talking quite a big number of jobs, yes. Okay. Because you're also talking, besides the letter carriers who actually do the delivery, you're also talking there'd be a decrease in the mail handlers and the clerks who work at the plant and get the mail ready for those days, as well as the rural letter carriers who function in the, not the city, but in the rural part of the state. So those people would also be affected and lose their jobs. So that's how many jobs you're talking, quite a few, just in the state.
Postmaster General Patrick Donahue is trying to end Saturday service as a way to cut costs.
Our Postmaster General has decided that, hey, let's just get rid of service, get rid of this and that, and we're just going to go away. And that's why, basically, we're saying now is that we need a new Postmaster General. He has to go. We got to get rid of him.
But Congress and the Congressional Budget Office told management last week that it doesn't have the authority to do so. Still, conservative Republicans Darrell Issa of California and Tom Coburn of Oklahoma are looking for an end around to that decision so they can slowly starve to death Saturday service. Fortunately, there's a way to save money, jobs, and mail delivery in the United States, which is constitutionally mandated, by the way. Many people assume that it's email that's doing in the post office, but that's not the case. While first-class mail has dropped off a little, we all know we still get plenty of stuff in our mailboxes every day.
It's important all around the country. A lot of people, whether it's in their personal lives or their businesses, depend on Saturday deliveries.
The post office has traditionally been self-sufficient, supporting itself by selling stamps and offering other services. In fact, only a decade ago, it was overpaying its retirement obligations by more than $70 million. So the Republican-led Congress and George W. Bush have figured out a new way to starve this efficient and egalitarian public service. They passed a law in 2007 forcing the post office to put aside more than $5 billion a year to pre-fund its retirement obligations, a requirement that no other government agency has to adhere to, and despite the fact that its pension fund was already very healthily overfunded. While the post office faces increasing competition from the internet and private delivery corporations, politicians in Washington are putting artificial economic barriers in the way of its success. This means service suffers for the many small businesses and others who rely on mail in Rhode Island. And for some of the letter carriers here today at Garden City, could also mean their jobs. This is Bob Plain for Labor Vision and RIFuture.org. Representative Ferry, why is payday lending reform important?
Well, because families are getting caught in a financial disaster with payday loans because of the high interest rate that they charge. I have an employee who got caught into that. Like I said, he made a loan about $350 in November a few years ago and didn't get out of it until the following July because actually I found out about it and helped him with it.
Right. So why has it taken 3 years to get this through the General Assembly? What's the holdup?
Well, I think part of the reason that we've gotten this far right now and have the momentum is because we've grown the coalition. We've done the education we need to do. Because most people believe that, what's the matter with this loan? Somebody has an emergency, they go get a loan, in 2 weeks, they get paid, they pay it off. What's so bad about that? So they have to pay $35 fee. Well, it sounds reasonable, but that's not the business model of payday lenders. The business model is to have these people repeat the loans. And most people who are in that circumstance end up finding out that they can't pay the loan off in 2 weeks. So what they do is they pay the fee and then they make a new loan. And the average person does that 8 times.
Margot Morisseau, you're with the Coalition for Payday Lending Reform. Tell us why it's so important that we reform payday loans in Rhode Island.
Payday loans are really taking advantage of our working class families who are really, just getting their feet underneath them and starting to advance and build their own assets. And getting caught in a payday loan is really a trap that really kicks their legs out from underneath them. And the predatory interest rate of 260% is just overwhelming for people to try and get out of debt at that rate.
And about how much in payday loans do we see in Rhode Island? The number is astronomical, isn't it?
It is, and it keeps increasing every year. I believe the latest figures that we have, $78 million was spent in Rhode Island on payday loans. So really, if you think about saving that money and investing that into our local economy and stores and grocery stores and other services, it would be a huge economic boost for our state.
I know we hear often that this is the only option for people to get a quick loan. That's not entirely true, is it, Margot?
No, it isn't true at all. And actually, they have done surveys. Pew had a great study out this summer where they said that they found out that 81% of people had another place to go to borrow the money. They could have asked friends or family. They could have gone to a pawn shop. They could have gotten money from their employer, asked for an advance on their paycheck. So really, for that last 19% that don't have another place to go, we have three great products now in Rhode Island that are payday loan alternatives. Capital Good Fund has an amazing product. They make up to $1,000 loans with no credit checks. Navigant Credit Union has something called the Smart Start, and West Elmwood Housing Development Corporation also has a loan alternative. So they're easy, they're accessible, they're here to cover that 19% that don't have any place else to go. So we're ready to move forward on this legislation.
How hard is it to get the bill through the State House when former Speaker Bill Murphy is lobbying for the other side?
It's very difficult. It's extremely difficult.
Yeah, and how do you see that play out? Do you, or do you just kind of sense his presence around the building?
Yes, I haven't had the chance to talk to him at all. I would be open to having a conversation with him, but we know that his influence here is quite astounding. And we have a coalition of over 80 members, over 40 organizations. Every year that this legislation doesn't get passed, people get very upset, and the coalition builds and builds and grows. I can't believe how large this coalition has become. And every year this coalition is dedicated to sticking together to make sure that we are going to get this passed. So we're not going away until this bill is passed.
Cool. Now you guys actually have a majority of members of the House signed on, correct?
Correct. We have 52 members of the House that are co-sponsors, and we have 29 members of the Senate. So we have the majority in both the House and the Senate. So the support is there, but now we need the support of leadership.
Yeah, and what's been your recent conversations with leadership, or where do you believe they are? I know that that the Speaker of the House has been kind of on the fence and reticent to offer his support, but I haven't heard anything from the Senate President.
We haven't either. We would love the opportunity to sit down and have a conversation with the Senate President and with Speaker Fox.
Okay, thanks, Margot.
Thank you.
We are here today to call attention to the need to increase the minimum wage, not only in Rhode Island, but also nationally. President Obama spoke about it in his speech, in the State of the Union message this year, and the simple message is this. No one working a 40-hour work week should be struggling to keep their heads just above the poverty level. As the richest, most powerful nation in the world, we can do better than that, and that is our cause, that is our goal. The minimum wage is obviously an important issue that affects far too many Rhode Islanders. Although the state of Rhode Island's minimum wage is $7.75 an hour, is higher than the federal minimum wage of $7.25 an hour, it's not enough for too many families who are struggling to make ends meet. Now, in the last 2 decades, household income for the top 1% of wage earners grew by 58%. But over that same period, the other 99% saw an increase of only 5.8%. That's a tenfold difference that places the issue of income inequality in stark contrast. If the minimum wage of 1968 had kept pace with inflation, it would be worth approximately $10.50 an hour today. I believe that it's time, we all believe that it's time to acknowledge that the decline of the American middle class and the rise of income inequality are directly related in part to the loss of purchasing power from a largely stagnant federal minimum wage. So if there is one dream that unites us as Americans, one dream that can truly be called the American dream, it's that if we work hard, we can pass on to our children a better life and a better world than we ourselves enjoy.
Thank you, Jim, and it's a great honor to welcome you to the 1st Congressional District and to have my senior colleague here for this really important announcement. I want to thank everyone who is here and acknowledge some of the great folks behind me, Stan Israel and Patrick Quinn from SEIU, Jim Riley from UFCW, Tom Savoy from the Carpenters, Brett LaPlante from the Plumbers, Joe Walsh from the Electrical Workers, and Scott Duhamel from the Painters representing the building trades, and others who have joined us today for this important event. I want to thank Kate for being here, and we're going to hear from her in a moment, and for the great work that you're doing at the Institute, and welcome Bernardo, and look forward to hearing your words. As you all know, our country was built based on a strong and thriving middle class, and that middle class was based on a simple idea that if you worked hard, played by the rules, you could afford to provide for your family, own a home, send your kids to college, and maybe even put a little away for retirement. Unfortunately, this has become harder and harder for so many Rhode Island families. The effects of the financial collapse on Wall Street and the lingering effects of the housing crisis are still being felt in cities and towns all across our state and all across this country. The gap between the wealthiest Americans and the most vulnerable has risen to its highest levels in decades, and the ability of families to move into the middle class is getting harder. According to Kids Count, 16.7% of Rhode Island children live in poverty. Thousands of Rhode Island families can't find work today, and our low federal minimum wage makes it difficult for many who do have work to provide for their families. And that's why I'm very proud to be here today with Congressman Landrum, with Kate Brewster, with all the individuals behind me, really to announce our co-sponsorship of the Fair Minimum Wage Act, a common sense proposal that would raise the federal minimum wage from $7.25 an hour to $10.10 an hour over the next 3 years. For the last 4 years, the federal minimum wage has failed to keep up with the cost of living and left working families dependent on government aid to make ends meet. A full-time worker earning the minimum wage makes $14,500 a year, leaving families below the poverty level. No one who works full-time should have to raise their family in poverty. Enacting the Fair Minimum Wage Act would increase pay for as many as 30 million Americans and offer tipped workers their first pay hike since 1991, and would directly benefit 72,000 Rhode Island workers. In addition, at a time when the real value of the minimum wage is at historic lows, this measure would increase consumer spending, helping to strengthen our national and state economy. A fiscal Fiscal Policy Institute study found that states with higher minimum wages have, quote, consistently better economic indicators than others. And an analysis of recent studies indicate that raising the minimum wage would not negatively impact job growth. As a new member of the House Democratic Whip Task Force on Poverty and Opportunity, I know that this Fair Minimum Wage Act is one step in the right direction, but there's still much more work to do. It's very important that we build a 21st century economy that works for all Americans, all Rhode Islanders, not just those at the top. And I look forward to working with my senior colleague, Congressman Langevin, and all of you as we work to ensure that we raise the federal minimum wage to help working Rhode Island families.
So Scott, tell us how an increase in the minimum wage would reverberate through the economy. How would it help people who are making more than minimum wage?
Well, I could say what I see every day from my members and the other members of the building trades is when they work and when they get paid, and especially if they get increased pays, they spend more. It's just it's a natural inclination for all workers. If you make more money, you spend more money. Maybe to benefit yourself, maybe to get better housing, maybe to have a steak and a beer when before you were having hot dogs and beans. But it's absolutely true. Those who earn more spend more, and that goes directly to our economy in Rhode Island. I've never seen it change. I don't think there's any statistics that could disprove that.
Yep.
Our 2012 Rhode Island Standard of Need that looks at what it costs to live and raise a family in the Ocean State finds that a minimum wage worker today at $7.75 an hour falls short of meeting their basic needs by $474 a month. So it's quite significant. The wage that a person would need to earn to keep up with the cost of housing, food, healthcare, some of the very basic expenses that we all have, is between $11 and $12 an hour. So certainly a minimum wage of $10.10 per hour gets us much, much closer to a person being able to afford to live here in the Ocean State, which is an expensive place to live.
Yeah, tell me about that. Why is raising the minimum wage kind of uniquely important to us here in Rhode Island?
Well, certainly the Northeast is an expensive place to live and raise a family, and I think that we all agree that the minimum wage is clearly the floor, that where the wages we want to have are higher. And generally when we see an increase in the minimum wage, we see wages of lower wage workers maybe are earning a little bit more than the minimum wage go up. And so again, it will benefit all of us. When people are able to spend more in our economy, it can help grow jobs, and it certainly behooves us all to have people in our community who are able to keep their heads above water.
Thank you for joining us for this edition of Labor Vision. We appreciate your input and encourage your comments. Labor Vision can be seen 3 times each week: Tuesdays at 7 p.m., Thursdays at 8 p.m., and Saturdays at 5 p.m.